This is Long Way to the Top, and I'm your host, Shane Bryan. If you were alive and listening to music in the 90s, then chances are you would have remembered my next guest because they were a staple on commercial radio. They graced our shores in 1992, just prior to the release of their 93 sophomore album, God Shuffled His Feet. And now, Canadian band Crash Test Dummies are back with their 30th anniversary world tour. Lead singer, guitarist Brad Roberts joins me on the show. Brad, welcome.
Well, thank you very much.
Big time distance between the first tour of Australia and now. It was right on the cusp of the new album. You went back over to Canada, did the new album. What was the reception like, given the fact that they were in Australia the first time around, given the fact that you were pretty much a brand new band coming out with just sort of one song, Superman song?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Superman song was massive in Canada, and we were a huge phenomenon. But it was not massive anywhere else. And so when we went to Australia, we had a moderate turnout, to be honest with you. But that was to be expected because we weren't on the radio at that time. And then when we made God Shuffle His Feet, we toured so long and I got so exhausted that by the time it came to do markets like South America and Australia and further flung places, I raised my hand and said, you know, I just can't do this. I gotta take a break. I've had enough. Yeah. Just a sanity break, because it was such a powerful journey, and I was just spent. Yeah. So that's why we didn't end up touring in Australia, to long and the short of it, when we had a big record out. Like, you know, I mean, it seems kind of stupid that we didn't go there in retrospect, but we didn't.
And it's kind of interesting too, because, you know, people will often look at bands like yourself and go, oh, they came to the scene with, you know, with God Shuffled His Feet, and suddenly it was huge. And, you know, there was a lot of work, a lot of hard work before you even got to that album.
Yeah, that's true. We had made one record, you know, before that. It was our sophomore release, as you pointed out earlier. Yeah. And we had toured around Canada and America and a little bit around Europe and Australia, long before we ever had a hit, in internationally speaking, that is. Yeah. Like I say, Superman song was a huge hit in Canada, but it was not a huge hit anywhere else. Ironically, was a huge hit in America, but was rejected by Canada.
So let's go back to the origin of Crash Test Dummies. I believe that it's tied to the history of a couple of Winnipeg night spots, the Spectrum Cabaret and the Blue Note Cafe.
Yes. Well, as it happens, I grew up next door to a couple of boys who would grow up to become entrepreneurs and open up, one, the Blue Note, and two, the Spectrum. The Blue Note and the Spectrum were different from each other. The Blue Note was an after-hours place. It was open till like 4 a.m. They served beer in teapots after hours, you know, and it had a certain seedy appeal. Whereas the Spectrum was, and by the way, the Blue Note had what was called an open stage, which meant that basically anybody who was willing to play for free could play there, right, as long as they weren't super offensive. Yeah. And so they were always having musical acts. And that's how Crash Test Dummies grew up. We grew up around the Blue Note Cafe, doing covers and not even having original material for a few years before I decided to turn myself over to the writing of songs.
when you were doing covers, and I kind of, have always sort of wondered this about you and Crash Test Dummies. You've got such a distinctly baritone voice. What type of covers did you do?
We did the theme song to Gilligan's Island. We did I'm 18 by Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
We did that's so long ago, man. I can't remember what the hell we did. But we would just learn the song in a key that was good for my voice.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is such a unique voice. Let's go to the album, God Shuffled His Feet, when you got back to Canada. I mean, this is an album that has really stood the test of time. A number 5 album here with, obviously became a number 1 song. Produced by Jerry Harrison from Talking Heads. What was it like working with him?
Well, it's funny. When I first met Jerry, I said, Jerry, on the song called Home, do you know that track?
Yeah.
The Talking Heads?
Yeah.
I said, I thought you just did a fantastic job on the keyboards. And part of the reason that I'd like you to produce our record is I just figure anybody who can write that keyboard part has got to be, good enough to produce my record.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, well, as a matter of fact, that's David Byrne playing that keyboard part.
Did you go, okay, well then can we have David Byrne?
Well, I should have, but I didn't.
No, you shouldn't have. You shouldn't have.
Well, Jerry went on to watch television and fight with his girlfriend while we made a record.
Oh, right.
And he ended up getting fired.
Right. Right. But I mean, that kind of shows you that if you hadn't have had that, if he hadn't have not done his job, you wouldn't have ended up with an album like it is. If you had brought David Byrne in, he probably would have done something completely different. Sure,
he would have. We did it without Jerry. That's the point.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the album is, it seems to be a very, not anti-religious, but a very questioning album when it comes to the ideas of God. Even the title song, the music video features a group of people that are gathered in a theatre to hear God speak, only to find out, he's a puppet operated by an old man out the back, like Wizard of Oz. That sort of theme, does that come through? Where did that come from, I guess, is the question.
Well, first of all, I would point out that I think that the questioning song about God is there's really only one on the record, and that's the title track, as you point out. And that's definitely about that territory. How did I get inspired to do that? Well, I studied English literature and philosophy, and in this case, the philosophy rubbed off on me, and I always had an interest in the so-called rational arguments for the existence of God in the history of philosophy.
Yeah,
and so that informed those lyrics, I think, probably more than anything.
Yeah. And of course, we come to, the massive single that you had. Where did the title come from, may I ask?
Well, the long and the short of it is this. I wrote that song, and I could not think of lyrics in the chorus. So I went to my band and I gave them a demo and I said, I'll think of some lyrics, but for now, just deal with this. And they all came back to me and said, this is brilliant. Don't change it. Don't put words in. You don't need them.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And hence the title of the song is
the humming. It's
yes.
It's the humming song. and I guess really to put a chorus in probably would have taken away from the gravity of the lyrics. You know, the song dealing with isolation. You know, of a a suffering child, one with a physical abnormality, the third with a religious upbringing. It's kind of like the shame that we place on those who are different.
Yes. Well, I always identified with that community because I felt myself part of it to some extent. And
Why is that?
oh well, because I was very shy as a child, to be quite honest, and just did not feel like I was part of the larger group.
Yeah, I can identify with that. Likewise, you know, I think as a child going through school and that upbringing, suddenly you're different to everybody else. It's hard. It's a hard process.
Yes, kids are very what's the word for that? Conformist, I guess you could say.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, they have strict codes, and if you do the wrong thing or don't know the right thing or say the wrong thing,
yeah,
you know, you're in or you're out. There's a lot of that kind of thing.
Yeah. Sometimes in concert, I believe I've seen it a couple of times. You replace the third verse with one. It was a boy whose mum disposed of his tonsils after a tonsillectomy, and so he couldn't actually take the tonsils to show and tell.
Well, you did your research.
I did.
When I wrote that song, I wrote many verses, and I had extras. Yeah. And I used to pull out extra verses in that song sometimes in concerts. And I did it just to please myself. But then people started taking notice of it.
Yeah.
And it became a thing. And I didn't plan that. It wasn't me having a brilliant insight as to how to present myself.
I think it's great. It kind of reminds me of another Canadian band, Bare Naked Ladies. They kind of do a similar thing with, if I had $1 million, they would always sort of bring in different things in that song, and it became a hit in concerts. I think you need that in concert.
Was that a hit in Australia?
Well, not really. No, it wasn't a big hit over here, but they're obviously a favorite band of mine.
Yes, I see. Okay.
Yeah. But I guess the point is that when you're doing a live concert, you've got to change things up a little bit. Otherwise, you may as well just put the album on.
Well, that's true, and we do enjoy souping up the old songs.
Yeah.
Although there's something to be said, I think, as well for maintaining trueness to the record.
Yeah.
And it's nice to find a happy medium. I think we do that.
Yeah. Now you've brought back the original lineup, so you guys reunited in 2017, I think it was. Yourself, Alan Reed, Dan Roberts, Mitch Dorg. What's it like? I guess getting the old gang back together and touring.
Well, it's been 5 years now of the gang all being back together, and I really am enjoying it even more than ever. When I was a younger man and we were touring, I was under a great deal of pressure to do an enormous amount of press while I was on the road. Like right now I'm not on the road and we're talking and I'm getting press done, and that's great. I love it. I'm relaxed. I'm in my own home, blah, blah, blah. But when you're on the road and you're having to get up at 6 a.m. to go and play radio shows and, have to sing live on the air at that hour, and then have to go on and play a show at night after just doing interviews all day long, it becomes exhausting and soul destroying. And at some point you have to draw the line.
Yeah. I totally understand. It must be completely draining. I guess what do you do then to to unwind? You know, what does Brad Roberts do when he's not on the stage or not writing songs?
Well, back in the God Shoveled His Feet days when I was touring on a bus, I used to collect books and read them. And I read mountains of books. And I used to do that in the back lounge of the bus.
Yeah.
We had two lounges, one for people that wanted to drink and smoke and one for people who didn't. And so I would usually retire to the back and read like a nerd.
Where does your musical inspiration come from?
Well, inspiration's a funny word because I don't know that I don't know how much of a role it plays in what I do. I think of myself more as a craftsperson who is undertaking to do something that's not reinventing the wheel, that doesn't necessarily require inspiration in the sense of, oh my God, I'm going to do this utterly unique thing. I think it's more a question of sitting down and putting your nose to the grindstone and doing the work, and then knowing when to take a break is important too.
But when a song comes along, like, I mean, wouldn't you call that kind of uniqueness about it an inspiration?
Well, yes, but in the context of all the perspiration.
Yeah.
Like I think that song, that song had a certain appeal to it that seemed to be infectious, and to that extent, I suppose you could say it was inspired. But for me, it was just a matter of writing song after song after song.
Yeah.
I tried to write the best song I could every time I wrote a song. I believed every song I was going to write was going to be a hit.
Yeah.
If I didn't, then why bother writing the song? Unless it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Like, who wants to write just an okay song to fill in with the rest of them? No, I don't want to do that.
No.
So that's how that played out.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, just final question. What are you actually listening to at the moment on your turntable, if you have a turntable?
I'm a big snob who listens to classical music now.
Great. Yes.
And what classical music, you ask?
Yeah, why not?
Well, I like the 17th century vocal polyphony. I like Bach.
Yeah.
I like Mozart. I like Schubert.
Yeah.
I like all kinds of old music. I especially like the counterpoint of Bach.
Yeah.
He's definitely a favorite.
Yeah, music that really sort of evokes that emotion within you.
Well, yeah, not just, yes, it does evoke emotion in me, but currently I'm also studying music and with a teacher, and he's teaching me how to write in the classical vein. He's a composer himself. And so it's just as much for me about the intellectual task of acquiring a set of skills that I am only now coming to possess.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Can we expect a Brad Roberts classical album soon?
Well, maybe not a classical album, but we've already put out a song that has a definite classical influence called Sacred Alphabet. We put it out just last year in 2023. Or I'm sorry, we're not in 2024 yet, are we?
We are. We are. Yes.
We are. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, we're on the cusp of 2025. That's what it is.
Yes. Time's irrelevant anyway.
The interview. The interview in a nutshell. What year is it? Brad doesn't know.
Too funny. Now you're heading to Australia in 2025, so we'll just to clarify that.
Yes.
And You're going to be here in March and April. End of March, hitting Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane, Sydney, and then Melbourne on the 5th of April. So anyone in Tassie wanting to see Crash Test Dummies have to fly over to Melbourne. No Tassie dates, but you said you wanted to come here.
I wanted to come here in a big way. Yeah. We went to Tasmania the first time we toured in Australia. And I thought that would be on the list of places to go, but I guess there was no buyer in that part of the market.
Yeah. Come on, people. It's not too late. Fantastic. Look, thank you for being such an inspiration and staple of brilliant music in the 90s. And we really hope that this 30th anniversary tour of God Shuffled His Feet I guess, brings out a whole new group of Crash Test Dummy followers. What do you call them? Your fans?
I have no idea what you call them.
Dummies?
Yeah, that's what we get called.
Yeah, fantastic. Brad, thank you for joining me on the show. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Hit plus or follow to subscribe to the podcast and head over to Facebook at The Long Way to the Top podcast and give us a like. Keep on rocking and I'll catch you on the next episode of Long Way to the Top.